Peace and love, y'all. It's your brother A.D.V.I.S.S here with another installment of Show Us More, sponsored by More Interviews, aka Memoirs of Our Real Experiences. And for today's Show Us More with an alumni, we have person that again has done a lot, not only for the community, but especially within the community that I've been working with, doing with. I want to give my love and my respects to Kundan Chhabra. And before I bring in Kundan Chhabra, I am going to read Kundan's accolades for us before we start. But again, if you have any questions as we're going through, this will be a bit more discussion wise and a more of a learning portion of interview for Show Us More, because they want to show us more. That can be, again, music, that could be intellect, that could be concepts. Show us more. With that said, Kundan Chhabra is the creator of the justice-based holistic time management methodology, consulting, and coaching journey to help inclusive creative leaders become more confident, clear, and secure with strong, stable boundaries without walls. This includes reading your Akash, a multidimensional record of all your timelines to help you heal from the root causes of your self-sabotage, patterns including soul vows and soul contracts from your past lives. They grew up in Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, in Southeast Asia in a military dictatorship. Simultaneously, they were educated in a school for children of diplomats, ambassadors, and intelligence officers. This taught them a lot about power dynamics and manipulation tactics. This is how they now teach marginalized people on how to protect ourselves from them. If you want to learn more, that's why we're here. You can DM Kundan about their programs, Reclaiming Boundaries, and Akashic Focus Accelerator. But with that being said, again, I'd like to invite in Kundan. In here, much love. If y'all have questions, please put them down, because we're here for Show Us More. So, we're going to show us some more. Don't let it backfire.
Hello.
What's going on, Kundan? How are you doing?
Pretty good. I think I might have got an infection of some sort again, maybe, because I'm feeling a slight headache again and a little bit of a sore throat. So I'm taking my vitamins and supplements, especially garlic. Yeah, I think my uncle has been sneezing the last few days, and I may have got it from him too. So I've been giving him the same supplements that I take, and it immediately helps him. So,
Understood.
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Before we get started, and again, I'm gonna let you definitely. I'm having the floor a lot more on this, because this is more of a discussive, really kind of workshop type of Show Us More of what you're showing. Is there any questions? There's any comments or upfront things that you like to share with the folks before getting into it?
Yeah. So the topic is
I will put
duopoly,
it. Yes.
political and psychological manipulation, and specifically as a Hindu, I want to talk about how this manipulation impacts and harms me because of Hindu phobia. And I wanted to also talk about this podcast is not Hindu.
Yes.
And um, but also this is happening within a larger trend in California of these very disturbing bills. One of which you've talked about yourself, the SB 553. But then there's the other ones as well, specifically related to Hinduism. It's SB 403. And then there's also AB 957, right?
Yes.
And uh, And I think I want to talk about AB 957 first, which the governor just vetoed, right?
Yeah.
Because I want to show that as an example of how these bills, the way they're formulated, is like a Trojan horse, where
Mm,
if you oppose it, you look like a bad person, right? Uh, and and if you are for it, you sound like a good person because of the way it's framed, right? So SB 43 is also framed in a similar way, but it's more complicated to explain, whereas
yes.
with AB 957, it's so obvious how it's done. And I was just speaking to my mentor today about this in preparation for this talk, and she was saying, at first I was like, it seems almost like California is like the the other side of the coin of Florida, where in Florida the extreme right has taken over, and
Yes.
in California, the extreme left has taken over. But she was like, no, they're actually the same people. There isn't really a left or a right anymore. They're like,
Yes.
they're just using different manipulation tactics, different languages, different terms, but they are the same people, like just in different clothing.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. Well, that is
So,
the
yeah.
baseline for y'all, but go ahead.
And, as far as psychological manipulation, I made a post about, the different types of manipulation, like, um, a lot of people know about gaslighting already because there's so much in their lexicon, right? But there
Hmm.
are other methods like concern trolling, Schrodinger's douchebag, lampshading, right? Sea lioning, that's often not talked about.
Hmm.
And then the number one method is reverse victimhood, right?
Yes.
And then the Trojan horse, right? Which is the token, the pawn, as you mentioned last week, right?
Yeah.
And there are many types of pawns I mentioned, but the Trojan horse is like the number one, right, type of pawn,
Hmm.
where it can be both a person or a thing, right? Like this bell, these two bells, right? They're like a Trojan horse as well. But it can also be a person, like a pretendian, right? So like somebody who pretends to be something they're not to infiltrate a community, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of white people and even light-skinned people these days who claim to be indigenous, right?
Yes.
Uh, and and it's like there are two reasons why they do that. One is they don't want to be held accountable for their whiteness or for their white privilege
Okay.
or their light-skin privilege, right? Uh, but second, they want to double dip, right? Like Elizabeth Warren, where she wanted to keep her white privilege, right, and have all the opportunities related to that,
Yeah.
right? But also double dip because by claiming that her great grandmother or whatever was a Cherokee, and that therefore she was Cherokee indigenous, she was also getting the opportunities that were meant for indigenous people. I believe, I think in this context, she got a scholarship meant for indigenous people or something like that in her younger
Hmm.
days, right? So it's like a double dipping where you get to be white and be treated like a white person and not be killed by police and all get all the privileges, right? Uh, which by the way is actually racial capital. Like I don't like the term white privilege because
Yeah.
then people will argue and be like, oh, like what about the poor white person or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And it's like privilege isn't about what you have, but what you don't have to experience, right? Like not being killed by police.
Yeah.
Uh, but I call it racial capital to be even more specific because it's literally another form of capital where even if you have zero money, if you're white, you still have capital in the form of race, in the
Mm.
form of whiteness.
Hmm.
Because that person can still move to China, for example, right, if they have little money.
Yeah.
Uh, they can even get loans or borrow some money from their privileged white friends with their richer white friends, right?
Yeah.
And then move to China where they can make 5 or 6 figures, right? Uh, Especially if they're a man. Like there are literally places in China called a rent a white guy service where you get paid just for being a white man in a suit, literally.
Mm.
So what it is that there are companies where
Oh yeah, he
they
spoke.
have like,
Hmm.
yeah, there are these companies and corporations where if they need a big deal and they're having a high stakes negotiation for a really huge deal involving like millions or multi-millions or billions, then they want a white man to just sit in a suit for credibility.
Yep.
So that shows like whiteness is still the default everywhere in the world, right? And it's still like the most respected, the most put in the pedestal.
Yes.
So that's why it's become, and it's always been since they created whiteness and race and racism, like a form of capital. Same with like male privilege is male capital. You know, it's all cis privilege is cis capital. It's all like different forms of capital. So yeah, so they want to keep their racial capital and also get the opportunities meant for indigenous people, right? That's double dipping. The
Yes.
other one is avoiding accountability, where uh, if they do something that's anti-black or anti-indigenous, then they're like, oh no, it's, yeah. So that's a Trojan horse, right? Where I want to point out that being indigenous is not just about genetics. Like,
Yeah.
it's like somebody actually has to claim you, and you actually have to stand up for indigenous rights and actually do the ancestral indigenous practices. Like, you actually have to be connected and actually do it. Like a Hindu who has converted to Christianity or Islam is not indigenous anymore. It doesn't matter what their genetics is. Like, and they don't get a say. They don't get the same equal say as an actual Hindu who is still Hindu.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to convert to Hinduism. You have to
No.
be born into it. You have to you have to be either born into it or adopted at a very young age. Or in a very, very rare case, if you've actually gone through the Guru Shishya lineage with an actual credible Guru lineage that has gone back hundreds of years, and you've actually like been trained by that guru for decades, and you're actually committed, yeah, then you can, be called a Hindu, but you're still not converting into Hinduism. There's no conversion. You cannot convert into Hinduism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many people will try to not only shortcut, but like you said, at the same time is reap the benefits of both sides. And there's certain instances where that cannot be the case, but places are lenient, so that becomes the case.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about AB 957, right?
Yeah.
That's because that's more obvious, like what's going on. Like, and then even with that, if you oppose it, then you sound like a bad, evil, fascist person, right? Who is right wing and doesn't care about trans rights, right? Because what the bill says is that if you are a parent of a trans kid, including non-binary people like me, and you don't provide gender-affirming care, or you just don't affirm their gender, then in a custody battle, the court can take away your custody
Yeah.
rights. So on the surface, right, if you oppose this bill, you're like, oh, like it's like, oh, are you against trans rights? Like, what's wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and even the governor vetoed it, and he even provided a sensible reason, which was exactly my thought as well, right?
Yeah.
Because he didn't use the same terms that I did, because he has to be political and diplomatic, right? So he used the term marginalized, I think. But uh, this is if this was signed into law, this would be a disaster for racialized parents of
Yes.
trans kids, right?
Yes.
And by the way, I always use the term racialized to describe us black, brown, or indigenous people. And
Yeah.
I describe white people as non-racialized because of the same manipulation that I'm talking about, right? Because the manipulation is happening all the time. Like, I'm
Yes.
just tired and fed up with these people, claiming that, whenever we hold them accountable for their racism, then they say, oh, you're being racist. Like, it's like a woman, like, holding a man accountable, right, for sexism, and then the man calling the woman like sexist or uh, on misandry towards the guy, right? It's like
Yeah.
it makes it impossible to call anyone out for anything then, right? That's
Yes.
what they've done. So, but not only is it because race, it's because like they don't know the difference between race, xenophobia, and prejudice, right? They don't, uh,
Hmm.
or they don't care about the difference, right? So you can be non-xenophobic and still be racist, right? So this is how you end up with the whole defense, right? Where, oh, I'm not racist. I have a black friend, or I have a brown friend, or a brown nephew, or even a brown child, or a black child, right? That's like a married man saying, oh, I'm not saying racist. I have a wife, right?
Mm.
I'm not sexist. I have a wife, right? Meanwhile, they're beating the wife, right, every day, right? Uh, like marital rape was legal in the United States as recently as 1993, just 30 years ago, right? Uh,
Sorry, that's exactly my age. So that's
oh,
why I'm like, okay, yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, so first of all, the definition of racism, xenophobia means you just hate everybody. It means like you don't want anybody to be even near you, so you cannot have a black friend if you're xenophobic. That makes sense because you're xenophobic, right? And you don't want anybody different from you even in your presence. That's xenophobia, right?
yeah,
Prejudice is judgment without evidence, right? Racism is prejudice plus systemic power. And on top of that, more importantly, race and racism uh, literally inventions of these white people, these European colonizers, right? So because they invented it, they exempted themselves from being racialized. They
mm,
racialized everybody else. So that's why I call them non-racialized people, and I call ourselves racialized people to be very clear who experiences racism and who doesn't, right? Uh, yeah, so that's that's the difference between those two, right?
yeah,
And so back to this bill, that AB 957, right? Um, yeah, like getting the courts and the police involved has never been good for us, right? Or
yeah,
rarely been good for us. And then on top of that, my mentor today was saying also, like, what are they going to do after they take away the custody rights? The children are probably going to be put in a foster home
yes,
where they're most likely going to be abused
yes,
and where they probably won't have their gender respected at all,
no,
ironically, and they won't receive gender affirming care in that situation. And on top of that, they'll experience abuse as well as adoption trauma, all of that.
yes.
So yeah, this bill is just totally ridiculous for all those reasons on a number of levels. So I actually agree with the veto, right?
And again, it's important to be aware of this stuff because when you sent it to me, after I was looking at the many other bills
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, of course, about when we were speaking on the theft and what's been
Mm-hmm.
going on in that law around there. So when I looked in and then you sent me this and I was reading into it, I was like, yeah, no, it's it's getting extremely out of hand, but at the same time, this is a part of the tactic when a lot is going on. You shoot stuff out there, you throw a lot of laws and things all out there at the same time, hoping that one is going to sink, or rise above all many others, while still broadcasting news that's completely separate of what's going on and happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's the weaponization of social justice and the language of social justice,
Yeah.
right? Because of course we want the child, anybody who cares about trans race, of course, and I'm a trans myself, right? I'm non-binary. Uh, of course we want gender affirming care for the child, and of course we want the parent to affirm their gender and their gender rights.
Yes.
But not like this, not force them and involving the state and the police.
There's already a number of things that's cutting families away from each other. It's taking kids away from each other, from the parents, while at the same time weaponizing weaponizing that to a point where a lot of parents are afraid to actually parent their child because of a lot of the rules and laws that are so loosely thrown out there that at any moment in time, if the child has so much of this power, that then they can end up not only falling into that system, but then it leads the parents to, okay, well, now the child's running wild, but then y'all said I can't do this, I can't properly do it this way. So then if I can't even show this and do that, there's like, what can I really do? On top of also the school and stuff. I was talking about all those missing chronic absences and stuff, and after a
Oh
while,
yeah,
it goes up to
arresting
those.
arresting the
Yes,
kids or the parents,
yes,
depending on the state,
yes,
for missing the children missing school. In in California, in Northern California, it was still arresting the parents
yeah.
for the kids missing school. And in South Dakota, which the law just passed in February, it was arresting the kid for missing school more than 3 times. It was like three strikes law, just 3 times, which is just extreme. Like it's dictatorial, it's draconian, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
and then both the Trump administration and the Biden administration lost, was separating kids at the border, right? And they've lost thousands of kids. The numbers are not clear because they keep hiding and manipulating data, right? But it could be anywhere from like 5,000 all the way to 85,000. Like different reports give conflicting. There's like conflicting reports.
Numbers.
Yeah, and then it turns out some of those kids were actually U.S. citizens. So that makes it like more horrible even.
Again, a duopoly at its finest, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Duopoly.
yes. Look, continue. Give us a bit more, and then I got a few questions that are just coming from my mind, but go for it.
Yeah, so as far as the duopoly, right, uh, the United States, unlike other countries, has only two main parties. Like there's there's a few others like Green Party and Libertarian Party, but none of them have any real power, right? It's
Mm.
basically these two parties, which is why it's a duopoly. Whereas in other countries, like even Canada, there are several parties. In India, which is the world's largest democracy as well as the birthplace of democracy, it's not Greece, it's India. And they have like, the last I heard, I think it was like 2,000 political parties and about 20 different parties rule various states in India.
Oh,
And the party of the central government rules only about 5 states, right? And
wow.
so that's a thriving democracy right there, like just by like even that alone, right? It's like the it means the federal government or central government can't even meddle in any state beyond the 5 states, right? They have some power, similar
Yes.
to how here federal versus state, right? Uh, so here is a duopoly as well as a false binary. A false binary is more of an intellectual concept, right? Whereas uh, is a logical fallacy, right? Whereas a
Mm.
duopoly is an actual physical thing, right? That is happening, right? It's like there's monopoly, which is the only one party rule, then there's duopoly,
Yes.
right? So it's just one party away from a one party rule. So it's almost a dictatorship just by that alone, right? Uh, that then hence the term duopoly, right? Instead of monopoly, which is monopoly, right? Or duopoly. So, but also this is what they call representative democracy, right? Versus a direct democracy. So representative democracy means that it is laws are made via representation,
Yeah.
right? So what that means in practicality is that there are, instead of one person ruling and making all the laws, which is a dictatorship, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
what some people term a distributed dictatorship, right? Because instead
Okay.
of one person uh, ruling, it's about uh, 600 people approximately, right? Because there's the 100 senators, in the
Mm-hmm.
legislature, plus I think it's 471 or something like that of representatives in the house, right?
Okay.
So it's
That's
like
600 numbers.
571, yeah, so like 600. Plus there's the president, right? So the president is the executive branch. Then there's the judicial branch, which is the courts, and then there's the legislative branch,
But
which is the Congress and the Senate. Now, in theory, they say they have these three branches as checks and balances, right?
yeah.
So the executive branch is the one that does operations and actually enforces the laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
Legislative branch makes the laws, and the judicial branch decides on
The
those
laws.
laws, right? They especially can strike down a law or approve a law, right? Whenever there's a lawsuit, uh, and it takes a lawsuit and it takes it going all the way through the Supreme Court uh, for that to happen, right? So, and then the Supreme Court is not elected; it's appointed, right? It's it's appointed
Yeah.
by the president and has to be
Okay.
confirmed by the Senate and by the Congress, and then it's for life. So, so distributed dictatorship
Mm.
in terms of like the legislature making these laws, right? Which we didn't directly vote for, right? They instead they are voting for these laws among themselves, and all we can do is like with as before, all we can do is like make these calls and petitions, right?
Yes.
And tell them not to pass the spell, right? And then now there is the threat, of course, that if they keep doing what the constituents don't like, then in the next election they'll be voted out. So that's the only relief we have, right? In the meantime, once they're elected, they can basically do whatever they want,
Okay.
right? They can make all of these laws, and we don't get to vote on any of them directly. They're voting. So that's why, in that sense, too, it's a
It's
dictatorship,
it.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, that's what. So even on that term, like representative democracy is a dictatorship. Now, the argument is that direct democracy only works for very small populations, which is kind of a sensible argument. But now we have the technology through the internet. We can have a digital democracy that's a direct democracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you don't know about the options, or didn't even
Yeah,
know of the options prior, you wouldn't be able to procure and have this information. So
right.
if we didn't know what a
Yeah,
dictatorship was, we wouldn't be making those comparisons. If we didn't know what socialism was, we wouldn't be making parallels between what's actually going on with us and others. So a lot of this stuff,
yes,
again, what you were speaking on and just reiterating the point is a lot of it is hidden in the dark and it's done very subtly. So if we're not paying attention and we're not well aware of not only just our rights of where we're living and being in tune with the laws and the political, which again, everything in this life at this point is political. Just the way you live is also a political statement. If we're not informed on any of those fronts, yeah, all of this stuff will run, and then we have little to no options left to
right,
use and utilize.
right.
But go for it.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. Besides voting them out, there is another option, which is the option of lawsuits, right? And taking it all the way to the Supreme Court,
For it.
right?
Yep.
But even that, there's a pro and con because this is how Roe versus Wade, which is uh, the law
Ooh,
for
haven't heard that in a minute. Haven't heard nobody bring that up in a minute.
the women's right to choose law, was struck down by the Supreme Court because what the conservative, because first what happened was Trump started packing the Supreme Court with conservative judges who are anti Roe versus Wade, right? So once that was in place, then all the states started deliberately passing laws, right, passing these bills that directly violated Roe versus Wade on purpose. They did it on purpose so that somebody would sue. It was a bait, basically, like so many states were doing it, so that somebody would sue, and then it would go all the way to the Supreme
Yes.
Court, and that's when the Supreme Court struck it down.
Whew. Yes, y'all. Yes, y'all. And shout out to all those who are tuning in right now and, showing love. We appreciate y'all. This is a special edition of Show Us More, sponsored by More Interviews, aka Memoirs of Our Real Experiences. And this is part of a lecture series. And I'm grateful for Kundan coming on. And right now, the topic we're talking about is duopoly, political and the psychological manipulation. So I know it sounds like a lot of big words and all things that are going on, but really, as Kundan's breaking down and we're talking, these are everyday things that are going on and happening, not just at once. All of this is happening simultaneously. So
Yeah.
in here, pick up little pieces of gems and just knowledge. Just sit back. If y'all have questions, please share those questions. Want to clarify things. That's why we're here. But again, I'm just kind of going the back and forth with Kundan, but just letting Kundan have the floor. So
Another false binary, right?
mm-hmm.
It's the capitalism versus communism or socialism, right? Which are both just forms of Marxism, right? And unfortunately, like it's become another false binary where you're forced to choose between the two, even though they're both colonial. And unfortunately, the only people who are against socialism right now are the like extreme, not the only people, but the majority of people, right, opposing socialism, are not even really opposing against socialism. They're just anything that they don't like, they just call it socialism, right? Like if there's diversity on an Amazon TV show, they're like, oh, that's socialism. Like so these like American right wing folks, conservatives, it's like do you even know what socialism is?
Yeah.
Like you have to actually know what something is to be against something. You at least have to know your opponent, right?
Yes. That's to me, that's the equivalent of, and shouts out to Waterboy. I don't know why I'm bringing up Waterboy as a reference, but I am. But Waterboy, the mom, will always end up saying that's the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, and we can even talk about it too in education. That's why they call it not only an educated guess, but there's always the A, B, C, or the D, and people would be like, oh yeah, man, I'm just always just using C as an answer. Eventually, you will describe it, but that doesn't mean all of the tips that you've put there before means that it's exactly that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, they're even calling CRT, critical race theory, socialism. No, it's not socialism, it's its own thing, right? It is, yeah, it's getting so ridiculous. Now, the reason why I call both capitalism and socialism colonial is because they're both created by white men who were misogynist, sexist. Karl Marx was misogynist, sexist. In fact, it's possible that some of his writings were actually written by his wife that he never gave credit for, right? And he took all the credit. And he was extremely anti-indigenous, Hindu-phobic, anti-Hindu. He called Hindus, all sorts of names, degraded, etc. And look at his legacy, right? That where everywhere his creation went, socialism, communism, almost everywhere there was a genocide of indigenous people because he was explicitly anti-religion, anti-indigenous, right?
Yeah.
And he conflated religion and supremacist ideologies like Christianity, right? Where I wouldn't even consider Christianity to be a religion. It is the appropriation of religion. It is a supremacist ideology. It uses aspects of pre-European indigenous people,
Okay.
uh, including the Jewish people, and appropriated their religion and then absorbed it, basically committing what I call what's known as epistemicide, which is
Mm,
also cultural genocide, like Islam as well, is
yes.
another supremacist ideology. Islam is also appropriation of Judaism and, in the case of Islam, Arab
Yeah.
indigenous culture, right, and religion, where they literally destroyed all of the statues.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, statues. Yeah, they call them idols. They were not idols. They call our Hindu statues also idols. They're not idols. There's a specific term that we use. It's called murti,
Mm,
right? Uh, so yeah, so in where they go for Hajj in Mecca, right? There's a big square black stone, right? That stone is ironically or was indigenous, where in Mecca they destroyed everything else and only had kept that, right?
hmm.
And then they were like, oh, now like you worship the stone as I guess as Allah, right? And uh, same thing happened with Christianity. Once Christianity was absorbed by the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
right? In the Council of Nicaea, and when they removed a lot of parts of the Bible, they rewrote a bunch of stuff. It's quite possible that Jesus, as it exists in the Bible, might not even have actually
Existed.
existed.
Yeah.
It's a fiction. Like there might have been a real Jewish radical anti-imperialist person who, you know, um, rebelled against the Roman Empire, right? There might have been a real figure,
Mm.
um, but that one wasn't Jesus, like most likely, right? And they probably used that real figure to twist it and create this new fiction called Jesus.
Yes. And a lot of not only we even use mythology because some mythology can be not gonna say necessarily proven, but there is a lot more backstory and information that's found behind it. But that's how a lot of even stories in our movies based off of a true story. So
Mm-hmm.
in in terms of we talking about when it comes to the Bible, I mean there's a whole thing about using allegories. So I don't necessarily have to end up saying it's almost as if they're speaking vicariously for someone else because there is a lot of books in the Bible where not only were inspired by the Holy Spirit, but people were speaking vicariously through other people's experiences.
Yeah, Jesus was in Islam, but he's regarded as only a prophet in Islam and not a son of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I
So
can't say, well, I truly know, but I'm just going off of what you
that's
were giving.
yeah, I mean that's what they tell me. Like I had Muslim friends when I was in high school and that's what they told me, that he's regarded as a prophet. It's only a prophet, not a son of God.
Okay.
Um, but but yeah, so in China, Marxism killed 40 million people,
Mm,
most of whom were indigenous, most of whom were Buddhists. I think a few of them might have been Hindu, uh, and Taoists as well. And it's basically known as the fastest genocide in history. Not necessarily the highest, but the fastest because like
yeah.
the largest, basically the largest genocide in a short period of time, right? That's why it's called the
Mm,
fastest genocide in history. And then likewise, there's like millions killed in Cambodia, the Khmer genocide. There are millions killed in Vietnam, North Korea. Yeah, like everywhere. And this is I know this because I'm from Asia, right? But there are probably so many Marxist genocides in Africa and South America as well, right? That I don't know of. But
yes.
40 million is a lot, right? Now, the argument when I tell Marxists about this is like, oh, like were they actually following his writings or his ideas, maybe they thought they did, but like how is almost everybody wrong then?
Yeah.
Like, how is almost everybody ends up committing genocide? Like, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense. Like, how is everybody misinterpreting his writings and committing genocide? Like,
Yeah. I you're making me also, if you do know, you let me
mhm,
share it. Think about the origins of where genocide came from. I mean, I
mhm,
know most of the. I'm not gonna say most of, but I can at least think up reasons for why there would be genocides for certain things. But at the same time, that goes to show you not only how political movements can become extremely powerful
mhm,
if put into the right hands, but it shows that the, I don't even say drawback, but the response to things of that sort ends
mhm,
up coming in the form of your life being taken.
mhm. Yeah, yeah,
I had a
exactly.
question down there that said, what about Myanmar?
Yes, Myanmar. Yes, what about Myanmar? I was wondering if you want to clarify that because I can talk about Myanmar too. That's another case of uh, how irresponsible these liberals and leftists are and what it ends up creating,
Okay.
right? Um, and I also want to clarify that I am an indigenous Hindu, Buddhist, and Sikh. I am indigenous. I'm neither left nor right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm neither a capitalist nor a Marxist or communist or leftist or socialist. I'm not a conservative. I'm none of these things because I'm against all of them, right? Because all of them are colonial. They're all the same people in different clothing, right? In different costumes. I think this is why both Dr. King and Malcolm X have spoken out against these people, right? Dr. King said that the white moderate is uh, I've reached the almost
Oh,
regrettable conclusion that the white moderate is a greater stumbling block to the Negro than even the Ku Klux Klan,
yes,
right? Or the
yes.
White Citizen Council, right? Because they're more committed to order than justice, right? And then Malcolm X has several quotes about them. In fact, he literally said the same thing I said, where he was like, in America, there are no more Republicans and Democrats. There are only these leftists and conservatives, and they're basically the same people. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's a very long quote, but there's a shorter quote where he was even more hard hitting, where he literally said that the the conservative is both the conservative and the liberal or the leftist, right? Now, some people try to distinguish between a liberal and a leftist. I don't. I see them as basically the same, right? Now, leftists claim to be more radical or whatever, but they're both imperialists, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, so Malcolm X said that both the conservative and the liberal show their teeth, but with the conservatives, they're smiling. It's very clear.
Yeah.
But the liberal pretend, they're snarling, right? They're snarling, right?
Yeah.
And but with the liberal, you think they're smiling. They pretend to be smiling, but they're not. They're the ones who will stab you at close range.
Yes.
I'll stab you in the back.
Yes.
So, so given that context, like this is why I'm against both. But you will see me on Facebook or Instagram railing against leftists and liberals often, though, because they're they're the ones being most loud and Hindu-phobic right now, right?
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
and also they're the ones that are more manipulative because although the conservatives themselves have taken a page from the leftist playbook, right?
Mm-hmm.
because after Obama was elected, and this is how Trump got elected as well, they literally made an 8-year plan to get somebody like him elected, right? So what happened was literally like factions of white supremacists, literal white supremacists, right? Including like the faction of David Duke and his godson,
Mm-hmm.
Derek Black, and all these different people, right? And this is for Derek Black's, this was even before Derek Black's so-called conversion into being a liberal, right? But there was literally this faction uh, of these various white supremacists and white nationalists who banned the N-word from their forums.
Okay.
So it's like, wait a minute, like, but they're still like white supremacists. Did they stop being racist? No. They took a page from the liberals where they decided to be covert and take their fight politically, socially, and legally. Oh, someone said, I remember that. That was crazy. Yeah, yeah, that was like pretty crazy. They banned it from their internal forums, right? From their like internet forums and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They banned it.
And it
Uh,
became a trigger. It was also a trigger if word had happened, right? What I mean by trigger, so like an algorithm, the algorithm already can end up if someone does end up using it to get flagged.
right, exactly. You get flagged as well. Like, uh, well, not yeah. So they banned it everywhere, right? They basically told their followers not to use it on social media either.
Mm-hmm.
But they even banned it inside their own like internet. They had their own forums, some similar to like 4chan and all that.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh,
Wow.
so yeah, it's yeah. So it's crazy, right? And so with the liberals, they they won't call you the N word, but instead they'll speak about black on black crime, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
they will say, uh, or they will say, what about the poor Africans? Or they'll say black people are lazy, right? So like that's in the case of black people. In the case of Hindus, they will say, oh, Hindus are fascists or fundamentalists, right? They will, uh, and then they'll try to paint a narrative to prove that, right? They'll paint a propaganda to prove that. Uh, so basically, the word fascist and fundamentalist have become the modern word for savage. So they're still calling us
Mm-hmm.
savages and thugs, but they know that if they call us that today, then they will be called racist, right? So so they don't want to do that, and so because they show one moral superiority, that's what just grinds me and just like irritates me about them. Where like not only are they covert, not only do they still want to be racist, they want moral superiority on top of that. Like they want that veneer of being moral superior.
Think of a 7-layer cake and all the
Yeah,
multiple layers just for you to get to the core and nothing's in there.
yeah,
Those are all of the feints, all of the facades, all the mirages and mirrors that is backed up by multiple walls on multiple walls on multiple walls. And when you think you've gotten to where you are there, you're still only part way there.
yeah. So if you want to talk about Myanmar, we can talk about that. It's
Yes. Yeah. Why?
right now.
Because it's why? Why? Because it just is. That was their question.
What?
That so earlier that was their question. The name on there is why. The username is why because it just is.
Oh, why?
They
Because it
asked the
just.
question that they asked. Yeah, they
Yeah,
asked that question
yeah.
about Myanmar. What about Myanmar?
Oh, yeah. So Myanmar right now is basically it's just chaos right now, right? Uh, because the military did a coup in 2021, in February 2021, and the it's not the first time they did a coup. The very first coup was in 1962,
Okay.
and they did the whole. After that, it became a Marxist military dictatorship where hundreds of thousands of Indians, especially Hindus, were either kicked out or just forced to leave, right? Because what they did was my nana, my my mother's father, my grandfather, right, was his assets were seized in via nationalization.
Hmm.
Uh, my mother was not allowed to go to medical school because she was uh, termed a foreigner,
Yeah.
and she was issued a foreigner registration card uh, instead of being allowed the national registration card, NRC, right? NRC versus FRC. So, and and before that, it was a sort of federal democracy, right? And no, actually, it was a democracy. I don't think it became federal. Uh,
Hmm.
so, so what happened was about so a lot of these ethnic groups and Myanmar have been converted into Christianity. They've been Christianized,
Yes.
and about 6 months before independence, I think Myanmar received independence around 1947, 1948. The founder of our country, the father of the country, so the man known as the father of the country, who was also the father of the military or the Tamador, right?
Okay.
Who fought against the colonial powers, Britain and Japan. Japan was also acting like a colonial power at the time, conquering all these countries. And this man was trying to unify all the ethnic groups and stuff, and gain independence from Myanmar as a unified country,
Hmm.
right? And he was assassinated. He was killed about 6 months before independence. A group of gunmen came into the cabinet meeting and killed him and his entire cabinet.
Wow.
And they found a scapegoat, a local scapegoat, Usa, who was arrested and convicted. But there are some people have said that it's quite possible the British were most likely responsible or behind
Yeah.
it, right? Behind that. Like they supplied the ammunition for it, the guns. They might not have told him directly to kill him, but they they
Conspire.
sure did. Yeah, they sure did incite him and also supply the weapons. And and so the person who could unite the country was killed. And so after it gained independence, and it didn't want independence as a commonwealth, they wanted as its own country. Uh,
Mm.
so commonwealth, what that means, like for example, in Canada, the head of state uh, is not anybody local. The head of state is the King of England. It was the Queen before that. Now
Hmm.
it's the King of England. So yeah, that and just like India also did not want to be part of the Commonwealth, neither did Myanmar. And so,
Canada or the UK?
um,
You talking about Canada or UK?
no, Canada, like the head of state is
Oh, okay.
yeah, like everywhere there's a Commonwealth where all the former colonies that are still part of a so-called Commonwealth,
Yeah.
they didn't really gain a real independence because the head of state was still the royal person, right?
Understood.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah. So like about 4 years before the 1962 coup,
Okay.
Myanmar decided that they declared to be a Buddhist country.
Hmm.
And this pissed off the Christians as well as the Muslims. And they created so much chaos that they destabilized the entire country. And so the leader at the time, I think the prime minister, he gave temporary emergency power to a military general, and the general basically declared martial law, and it was supposed to be for a year or two only, and after a year or two, after everything stabilized, he handed back power.
Okay.
But then he got a taste of power. So about, I think, a year after he handed back power, he took it back in a coup in 1962. So fast forward to 1988, when people were finally sick of all this, and they started going through, they started protesting in mass protests, right? And coincidentally, the daughter of Aung San, her name is Aung San Suu Kyi, who is now a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So most people don't know that she is actually his daughter, right? And so there's a legacy, a political legacy. And she was like taking care of her dying mother. And in the middle of her taking care of this, all of these democracy protests were happening. So she felt responsible and started giving speeches and started becoming basically the opposition leader. And the people were able to bring down about, I think, 6 successive governments through these protests.
Okay.
Because there would be like one military leader after another that would step down, and then another one would take over. And in 1990, they did the first free and fair elections in several decades. And for some reason, the military, they thought they would win the election, so they did not cheat, and they lost by a landslide by 80%. And then they refused to hand over power. They gave the excuse, we have to write a constitution first. And then they dragged the writing of that constitution for 18 years. And then they put Aung San Suu Kyi, the opposition leader, under house arrest as well during that time. So she was like under house arrest for 18 years. And in 2008, they forced a compromise in the constitution, which stated that they would only hand over power if they get to keep 25% of parliament by default, no matter who wins. Then they have 25% of parliament. And they get to still control 3 major government departments, including border control. And in 2010, they did another election that was also free and fair elections. They lost by a landslide. They lost another election in 2015 and 2020. And the opposition party won again and again by a landslide. And so now during all this time, they were also, due to the 1962 coup, Myanmar also ended up being in a civil war because none of the ethnic groups who were armed agreed to the dictatorship. So they were actively rebelling against the military dictatorship all this time, right? So some historians say that this is like the longest running civil war in history, right? And so around all this time, they were doing, the military was committing genocides of different ethnic groups.
Wow.
But the one that the West knows the most is the Rohingya Muslims. That's what the Western liberals and leftists keep talking about, right? And and they were like, and then Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the opposition leader, this woman was under house arrest for decades, right, and is an indigenous Buddhist leader, right?
Yeah.
The Western liberals and leftists were like accusing her of not doing enough for the Rohingya Muslims, of not speaking out enough against the military dictatorship, right? And they were even calling uh, her Nobel Peace Prize to be revoked. They were even creating a false equivalence between her and Trump.
Oh, you did
Uh,
speak about. I remember you speaking about this
imagine,
before. Yes.
imagine this: an indigenous woman, a Buddhist woman in an indigenous country that has been under house arrest for decades, equating her with this white male entitled billionaire, right?
Yeah. Fully misunderstood.
And Trevor Noah even did that comparison where he was saying like, all because she said both sides, right, both the Rohingya Muslims and their uh, military dictatorship are in the wrong, right? And she was correct. They were in the wrong. Because once you understand what's really going on,
Mm-hmm.
see, this is how the manipulation is done. It's done by omission and erasure sometimes, right?
Yes.
So, and first of all, that's a false equivalence because what Trump said was there are fine people on both sides, which is comparing the white supremacists who literally, like I think, uh, drove somebody down, mowed somebody down with a car, right? One of the
Yes.
protesters in
Hmm.
Charleston,
Drove all the
Virginia,
way from a whole different. Yes.
right? And literally mowed it down, like struck them down with a car. And so he was saying both. So on both the protester side and the white supremacist side, there are fine people on both sides. That's what he said. That is very different from saying both sides, both people are in the wrong.
Yeah.
And in her case, it's actually correct. It's the truth. Both of them are wrong. So what actually happened was the Rohingya Muslims committed a genocide against Rohingya Hindus, which Western liberals and leftists don't even recognize that they even
Yes.
exist. Yeah, they don't even recognize they even exist, right? So that's erasure. That's total erasure. They don't even, the majority of them don't even recognize it. Like if you look at democracy now, none of these people that seem to claim to care about all these organizations with very nice names like Democracy Now. Like I think NPR is the only one that even recognizes that they exist. But even then, you have to search for it. You have to know to search them. You actually have to search for the article. Otherwise, you won't find that article, right? Uh, um, so they committed this genocide against Rohingya Hindus. They, as well as anybody who's not Muslim, they were attacking Buddhists and everybody else too, right? Uh, and then they killed the men and the children. They raped the women and forced them into conversion via rape, right? Uh, and then kidnapped some of them to Bangladesh, right? During all this time, the military was also caught in the fire, in the gunfire, right? So the military already has a history with these people from before 1962. They know what
Yes.
happened, how the country was destabilized by these types of people, right?
Yes.
And then on top of that, they were actually attacked, right? So them being who they are, they escalated disproportionately and started just doing straight up genocide kind of thing. But they don't see a difference between Rohingyas, Hindus, or Muslims. They see all of them as Rohingyas. So now the Hindus are caught between the Islamist supremacist genocidal people and the Marxist genocidal military dictatorship type people.
Yes.
That's what
Before you,
happened. Yeah.
yes. In addition to what you're speaking on still right now, they were asking people in the comment asking what kind of government could this be called again? Of what you're explaining,
Which one?
what's happened
Which
happening in Myanmar. How would you describe the government, system there? The name.
yeah,
I know we're saying Marxism. We're saying,
I was getting to that. It was Marxist, but right now Myanmar basically has no government, basically, because even though the military did a coup. Like, so it's easy to conquer. It's not easy to rule,
Mm.
right? It's easy to rule you, but people actually have to obey you and listen to you, right? But now there's civil disobedience all over the country. There are peaceful protests, but there's also armed protests as well, where even in the past it was only like in other areas, in the ethnic groups that were fighting against the government, but now even in the major cities like Mandalay and the former capital Yangon, there are like you would see like random bombings, right? Where the resistance groups are literally doing these bombings of uh,
Hmm.
and fighting back with homemade guns and things like that. So it's total chaos. There's no government, no real government anymore. Like it's because this general that who took it over, he can't really rule. Like he got to do the coup, and it was a bloodless coup because nobody wants to fight against him directly like that,
Yeah.
right? They were like, it was a very easy coup because they already had most of the power in a way. The Westerners called it a hybrid democracy before the coup, but I wouldn't even call it that. It's just like a weird power sharing kind of compromise situation,
Yeah.
right?
You can have this part of this section,
Yeah,
25, give me 25% and give
yeah,
me three pieces of this while also having
yeah,
a side piece of that, and then you can have the rest of this here.
right, yeah. So, but by
It's like
calling it
dibs.
a hybrid democracy, right? They got to blame the indigenous Buddhist leadership for the genocide instead of the military dictatorship. So, and this whole media frenzy, right, is what gave that general the audacity to do a coup because he knew that the indigenous Buddhist leadership had no real global support.
Mm, mm.
So these liberals and leftists, they literally have blood on their hands. They're literally responsible for this coup.
Again, you can effectively make change,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, we just keep throwing everything away, naming
Mm-hmm.
everything, and not providing foundations to stuff so that when you do hand over bits of power, or again, whatever is the case, it doesn't just crumble in the hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, like you said, it becomes a lot more easier to just say, all right, you know what? Let's do away with this. Let's just run up and let's start a coup again, or let's just throw away with all this again, versus really trying to sit there and re rechange, restructure the fabric of what we call at least nation building, and creating a
Mm-hmm.
space and place for people to thrive. Because at the end of the day, that's that's also it comes down not only to just the political and psychological manipulation of plays, it's also the ideology of, to me, I'm hearing a lot of individualism in that
Mm-hmm.
ideology.
Yeah.
What kind of idea? I'm not to say ideology can't fix an EMR. So, oh, okay, that's a question. So, asking what kind of government ideology can fix an EMR?
It's not the government ideology. It's just Westerners just stopped needing to meddle with Myanmar. It was already doing fine. It was still a compromise. But, she was starting to make, like, we had only 10 years, right? After decades, we only had 10 years of indigenous Buddhist leadership. And, but even in those 10 years, she was able to do some good things. Like they had universal basic income, for example. We don't have that in the United States. She got that done. Like, she got that done. Like, it's so, so things like that. It was just let people be. Like the same thing they did in Libya. They killed Gaddafi without any thought about any support afterwards. And now it's chaos, total chaos there too. There's flooding right now. and there's no infrastructure to support them.
Yeah.
And there are all these different armed groups fighting each other, right? So, so yeah, it's not about the ideology. It's not about fixing it. You know, like you don't fix what's been destroyed for decades by these colonial powers, right? These all these colonial puppets. It's not about fixing it. It's not about the ideology. It's more about like just let indigenous people be. Like that's just leave us alone.
Yeah.
Like
But we want to be the big brother. We want to be the
yeah,
big sister and then come lend a helping hand. And while we're doing that, we might kick over half of your sandcastle. But again, we're trying to help you.
right. Meanwhile, you and I wouldn't even exist today if not for Myanmar, or to be more specific, if not for one man from Myanmar who literally saved the United States from a nuclear annihilation during the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Hmm.
when Russia and the United States were literally like head to head, threatening nuclear war at each other uh, due to the situation in Cuba, right? The Cuban Missile Crisis, and, and the United Nations Secretary General at the time was a Burmese Buddhist man named Uta. I believe he was only the third Secretary General at the time. And it was his negotiations
Hmm.
between the Soviet Union at the time and the United States that finally got them to agree to a peace agreement and the compromise. I think the compromise was that the United States would remove their missiles aimed at Russia and Turkey in exchange for the Soviet Union removing their, their missiles in Cuba that was aimed at the United States. And, and then it was his advice to President Kennedy at the time and told him, you know, don't gloat, right? So even down to like what will happen
Yeah.
afterwards, like because if you gloat, they will like if there was a President Trump at the time, imagine how bad that would have been. Uh, and if there was Twitter, if there was Twitter at the time, like imagine how much
Formerly
worse.
known as well, it's X now, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just it's hard to try, not even hard, it's just something that's even extreme to fathom
hmm
moving in from this place to go here.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
It's crazy. Elementary school. I could not imagine being anymore. And I think, yeah, exactly. Just being able to try to imagine and picture
yeah,
yourself in any one of those realms. Yeah,
hmm
that's why it happened in that era and not in the current era, and vice versa.
yeah, yeah. So so that's an example of like these Westerners being ignorant and yet arrogant, and then causing all sorts of chaos all over the world. Uh, Even when they are not directly, funding these, groups, these coups and stuff like that, or even if they're not directly
Yeah.
responsible, they're responsible for the narrative warfare, the cultural war that causes all of these chaos all over the world, right? Uh, and of course, they do openly also instigate coups all over the world as well, right? Uh, there's like too numerous to name what they've done. Like in the case of Korea, they literally like divided Korea into two by literally just drawing a line on a map, like without caring about the actual people of the event should be, you know, should be like divided like that, or they should even remain in the same area, right? They just literally like drew a line on a map. But yeah, let's talk about caste is not Hindu and this SB43, right? And I gave the example AB957 because I wanted to show how Trojan horses work, right? When a bill sounds good, right? Like, so this bill is supposedly to end caste discrimination, right? And of course, I, as a Hindu, knowing that caste is a colonial construct, and how horrible it is as horrible as racism. Of course, I want to end casteism or the caste system, right?
Yes.
But
I was just over here just wanting to join in and just get my copy. That was all.
oh yeah. Um, so first of all, caste is still taught in American schools as a uniquely Hindu or inherently Hindu issue or a Hindu construct. And the lie is that the caste system have supposedly existed for thousands of years. It hasn't. It's only existed for about 2 or 3 centuries, or as long as the British were ruling India, which is about, I think, 189 years. So by the way, the average lifespan of an Indian during British rule was only 27 years old. And they looted, in today's dollars, that amounts to about $45 trillion. So that's how much they looted from India. And they literally destroyed entire industries in India. Like, for example, they would literally cut off the thumbs of the weavers, the makers of textiles, of clothes, and they were making it by weaving it by using these looms, right? They literally cut off the thumbs of these weavers. That's how cruel they were, because a lot of Victorian women were only buying clothing, textiles from India, so it was creating competition with the UK manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
And so they destroyed the textile industry, for example. And one of the ways they destroyed it was literally not only to ban it, but to literally cut off the thumbs of these small business owners, basically. So that's how bad it was, right? And in total, they ended up killing 1.8 billion Indians, mostly Hindus, right? And yes, that's with a B, it's not a typo or anything, it's a B. And that's just through their policies alone, doesn't count the British bullets.
And this is over a span of how long?
Over, I think they ruled for like 189 years, approximately. Actually, that's officially they ruled for 189, but even before that, they were ruling through the British East India Company.
Okay.
So it was like they were the de facto rulers. They were like the proxy of the crown. So yeah, during this time, so the Portuguese and the Spanish already had a caste system called the casta system. And the Portuguese casta system is based on class, so the king and pope at the top, then aristocracy, then farmer, then slave. And then the Spanish was based on skin color and blood purity. So the Spaniards born in Spain were called the Peninsulares, and they were the top. Then there were the Creoles. They were Spaniards born in New Spain or South America. So that's how ridiculous it was. Even if you were Spanish, right? If you're born in South America, then your status is lower than if the person born in Spain. And then below that were the mestizos, which are
Mestizos.
the mixed Spanish native Indian people. Then, yeah, right there. Then the mulattoes were the native Indians, and the Negroes were the slaves. So the British took that to India and made it way worse, right? Because what they did was they knew that they had no right to be in India, right?
Yeah.
And they wanted to create a caste system in India as well, based on the Spanish and the Portuguese system, but they took it further and they they literally went to each of our lineage holders, the Brahmins, right,
Okay.
who were the teachers. They literally, at gunpoint, like literally pointed a gun at them. They went house to house. They literally pointed a gun at them and demanded all of our indigenous textbooks. And they took them and they literally mistranslated them.
Oh.
And they might even have rewritten some of them, right? And then made it look, and then they would also be kidnapping Hindu children, separating them from their parents, and then forcing them in these colonial residential schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so from a young age, for generations, children and grandchildren, right, were taught that caste is a Hindu thing. So it's like the ultimate gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
Ultimate cultural genocide.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So for generations, Hindus themselves were programmed to believe that's a Hindu thing. And then they gaslighted the whole world. Like the whole world now thinks that it's like a Hindu thing, right? When it's literally a colonial thing. That's why this book had to come out. Like imagine a book with this title had to come out to debunk.
Yeah.
Right? Caste is not in. That means this. Why is this the title? Because so many think caste is Hindu, right?
Yes. It's not, y'all.
Caste is not Hindu.
But see, that's where, like you said, we always say it's, knowledge is the key, but that's
Mm-hmm.
why people rewrite their history. They omit, like you said, and they erase bits and parts of histories, creating these holes in history so that, again, when you indoctrinate and you educate the masses in what has happened generations prior, it loses its power because of the fact that we're so far away from the previous of where it was. It's basically a game of telephone on purpose because they want that information to be lost later on down in translation, so that where are you getting this information from? How do you know it's credible? How do you even know that this was a thing way back when? What book brings your point in clear? And that's, of course, the tactic. But innately, for a lot of us, especially when you start looking at structures in a whole, like outside in general and not going yet specific, you already get the answer of this. Just this isn't just a one time and only one fit personal thing. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stuff within multiple different societies that are not unique instances. And I'm not saying that everybody in their own self, has their moment and point in time where that makes sense. But you go straight back out and you look at this stuff and it's like, yo, this has happened in this society, that society. But guess what? It was just named something completely different. And because of the fact that you've been told that, nope, this is only exclusively here, that's what the rhetoric continues to be. You stereotyped it so much to a point that it only stayed on that station on the stereo. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and translation is one of the methods, right?
Yes.
In fact, there's an Italian saying called "Tradidor tradore, something like that.
Mm.
Basically, it means translator trader.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and there's a whole book. There's actually a whole novel written by R.F. Kuang, a fantasy novel that's based on that premise. Where in that novel, she said, uh, every act of translation is an act of betrayal, right?
Mm.
Uh, so I wouldn't go so far, but yes, translation can be a betrayal to the culture depending on it's uh, how it's translated.
Because it becomes a
Yep.
misrepresentation.
Right.
I mean, even I think of it in this way. Math is a universal language.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone uses numbers. Even the slightest miscalculation, whether if building a building or even answering a simple math equation, can be skewed because of the fact you did the math wrong. Just
Mm-hmm.
think about just the certain words and the phrasings being misunderstood, which then completely disrupts a concept or an idea that was being taught in a culture. And then you come and use that that retransferred or translated culture idea, and you're completely off, but you're like, how? Because this is what was written, what's been put there out for me to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it just perpetuates further of the confusion, which again, that's one of the part of the other tactics, along with all the manipulation and things of that sort, is to get people confused and not knowing what word and how do we get these sources.
Mm-hmm.
Education is a
Yeah.
huge one. They screw all the time. Yeah, they screw it up all the time. It's
Oh yeah.
it's purposefully done.
So this SB 403, right?
Yes.
It's they've made a lot of amendments from the original bill, probably because of the threat of lawsuits, and also all the petitions and phone calls we've been making, right?
Yeah.
But the various the very early version, the earliest version of the bill, basically blamed the caste system on not only Hindus and Indians, right, but literally blamed it on Africans, Asians, and South Americans.
Hmm. I'm not
And
surprised.
they never named the Europeans in that list. They literally said caste system is a system in Africa, Asia, and South America, right? So they were basically saying all black and brown and indigenous people are casteist, casteist a-holes, but in a more polite political way, right?
Yeah.
And then they amended that bill, and then a new version of the bill only blamed South Asians, right? Uh, that's the term they use, South Asians,
Mm.
right? By the way, South Asian is a term invented by the CIA to muddy the waters. Uh, that's why if you see like somebody who called themselves a South Asian yoga teacher but not a Hindu yoga teacher, that's a huge red flag. That is erasing the Hindu roots of yoga, right? So,
Mm.
uh, and they don't speak for us. Anybody who calls themselves South Asian but never calls themselves Hindu, they don't speak for us. Like they're not for us. They usually end up being. Uh, I would end up finding out later that they're very Hindu phobic, right? So that's a red flag to watch out for. So, but anyways, they were blaming South Asians, and then they amended that bill. They removed the term South Asian, right? And I think they might have removed, yeah, they might have had the word Hindu in the original bill as well. They removed that too.
Mm.
So now, and then they removed caste from the main bill and put it as a subcategory of ancestry,
Mm-hmm.
right? So first of all, there are already uh, laws against caste discrimination. It already falls under ancestry, right? So you can still sue somebody for caste discrimination already. This law is unnecessary, right? The
Mm.
The other thing is caste is not clearly defined, so it becomes an anyone can sue anyone for anything kind of bill now, because they call it, they define caste as inherited social status, which can be like, I can sue you because you're taller than me,
Yeah.
or I can sue you because you have a vegetarian diet, because all of these are considered upper caste, right? Uh, height, like even height, like, because height is an inherited social status. Like, you don't get to choose how tall you are, right?
Yeah.
You end up, at some point you peak and you can't go taller than that, right? So
Yep.
I can't read this. What
I
is
got you.
this?
They wrote themselves out of their own act of implementing the caste system. They wrote the story about the crime they committed. Colonial people ish.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and ironically, because caste is not defined properly, and not all of us even know our caste, because Hindus actually don't have a caste. We've never had a caste until the British came over and started assigning caste to us, right? We had our own system called the Jati and Varna, which is not caste, right? And Varna was a philosophical idea, not a ground reality. Varna, and it wasn't hierarchical. It's horizontal. You can change your Varna at any time by learning a new skill, or you can have a different Varna. Now, Jati was ground reality, but it was just the way different tribes categorized themselves.
Mm.
So it was again not hierarchical. And sometimes Jati was by ethnicity, sometimes it was by profession, right? And one of the ways the British created caste was to literally criminalize entire jatis, meaning entire tribes. And so they became a criminal caste, right?
Mm.
And and, and another way they would do it is they would like force them to do like sanitation work and stuff like that as well, right? So so like if you're a criminal in a colonial system that is very violent,
Yeah.
right? Of course, other people don't want to associate with you, right? It's like, so that's how you end up becoming an untouchable. That's literally how they created the untouchable caste, or or what some people call the Dalit now, right? Another way they did, which the Portuguese also did, the Portuguese missionaries would kidnap Hindus one by one, with two bodyguards, right? And then
Wow.
they would rub, this is in the book, Caste is Not Hindu. They would rub their lips with cow, with beef, because Hindus don't eat beef, right? So they would rub their lips with beef and declare that they were untouchable among their people because they had done this taboo thing.
Mm. Mm.
So because some of us don't even know our caste, in that case, right, how would the state even enforce this law,
Yeah.
right? In that case, the state, uh, how would like you prove that there is caste discrimination when nobody knows their caste, right? Where how are you proving that this person has a specific caste, right? In that case, the state would come in and assign a
Yeah.
caste.
Hmm. Oh, I can see where that could get a slippery
So
slope, but go for it.
ironically, this is exactly what the British colonizers did. They came in and started assigning caste with a hierarchy to everybody. And because caste is not clearly defined, it's sounding to me like this is going to happen lawsuit by lawsuit. So once somebody sues somebody else for, say, being taller,
Yeah.
that will be another way that caste is legally defined and institutionalized.
Hmm.
Once somebody else sues another person for having a vegetarian diet, that will be another way that caste would be defined and legally institutionalized into law. So, because there's no real caste system in the United States, there is racism, which is different from caste.
Yeah.
There's there's classism, but there's no actual caste system, right? Now, there are anecdotal cases where some people have claimed to experience caste discrimination, but that's interpersonal. It's not systemic. It's not
Systemic.
like
Hmm.
there is no actual legal system. But this law, ironically, would end up creating
Rating.
a caste system legally, lawsuit by lawsuit, into the legal code and actually assigning caste to people.
Wow.
So it's literally a Trojan horse law where it's like people are just like the AB 957. It's like, of course you want to be against uh, transphobia, and in this case, of course you want to be against caste discrimination, right? But then it ironically would end up creating a caste system on top of being Hindu phobic, and it will end up racially profiling Hindus in particular, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? The same hate groups that sponsored this bill, there's a conflict of interest too, because these groups are not nonprofits, they're for-profit companies. They would end up be the ones who enforce and teach the trainings, corporate trainings on caste discrimination. They would not only end up profiting it, they would end up
Yeah.
enforcing it. So there will be way more like racism and colonialism against Hindus especially. But because their attitude, even though they amended the bill, their attitude is the same that they used to have,
Yeah.
that was in the original bill, blaming all black and brown and indigenous people. Eventually, they will come after all of us. They'll come after you as well eventually. Like, it will start with Hindus, but eventually it will be affect harm everybody.
If it hasn't done, I mean, haven't done so already. Again,
Yeah,
it's a multi-layered and planned attack.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's why there's this famous quote by a Nazi or during Nazi Germany. There was a person who was pro-Nazi, and this is a pastor, but eventually he became anti-Nazi. There's a famous quote where he says something about he was like when they like I'm just paraphrasing here when they came after the writers, right? I I did not speak out because I was not a writer. When they came after the trade unionists, I did not speak out because I'm not a trade unionist. When they came after the communists and socialists, I did not speak up because I was not a communist or socialist. Um, when they came after the Jews, I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me.
Yeah. Man, what a great analogy as well.
Yeah,
And to even to tie more into that, that's why there's so many divisions and again calculated
mm-hmm.
division because of the fact that if we were to understand that everyone, race, breed, color, orientation, all have a struggle, but be able to set aside and know that when one is needing the support more than the many, that everyone come and support the one. And then when that
Mm-hmm.
time comes for the same of all other stuff of others, it's the same effort.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah,
I mean, this is what I'm getting based off of just what you just spoke about. Is that if I'm not speaking in up and also speaking out for the gardener that's here out here for me, then once they're gone and I didn't do that and it's my turn and no one's here, it's because of the fact that that was the point.
mm-hmm.
You don't have to fully agree with everybody. You don't have to be there 100% of the way. But if there's things that are still there in common, just know that it's, again, a calculated effort on all parts. That you are here, they are also here. We're in this together, like it or not. But I would rather you like it more than not. But yes.
Yeah. And there's a great website called understandinghinduphobia.org, which I recommend people look at
Okay.
to understand. And, you know, some Hindus will say, oh, it's not Hindu phobia, it's Hindu misfear, which is hatred of Hindus. But we have to use a generally recognized term, right? Like we know that, for example, homophobia is both hatred and fear of gay people, right? Homosexuals. Uh, Even though the direct translation of the word phobia is fear, right?
Yeah.
But it means hatred as well in this context. So,
Okay.
so that's the other thing. Like sometimes tend to be, some Hindus tend to be very naive and they kind of like bring our collective image down and cause division and conflict with other groups of people, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and And it's because we have not been invited to these social justice spaces, or even when we are, like in my case, we like end up getting like pushed out, right? Because these spaces don't recognize their like global not privilege, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, and this is why it's important to distinguish between racism and colonialism, and between anti-racism and anti-colonialism, right? So you can be anti-racist but still be colonial because you're still holding on to your global not privilege, right? And even if you're racialized, right? So you can, just like there's white privilege, there's also, and white fragility, there is also global not privilege and global not fragility,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also what some people term onto epistemological privilege, uh, which
No
is,
clue.
so epistemology is a system of, it's a study of belief systems, right? So,
Oh, okay, okay.
so, and hence the term epistemicide as well, which is what the British did when they started uh, basically kidnapping our teachers and robbing their books and mistranslating them, cultural genocide, right? And and it's still being done. Like when white people teach their white yoga, that is also epistemicide, that is cultural genocide, right? And so, like we don't recognize a lot of Hindus that we don't. I don't know if it's a lot, but there's a significant percentage of Hindus who don't recognize these social justice terms, uh, like microaggression, right? So they will not recognize that they're being like treated. Sometimes they won't even recognize that they're being treated in a racist way. They'll just think that something is very off about this person, right? Like this Hindu guy was telling me that this person is doesn't, call him a savage or anything, but will question his competence, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's how it's done now, right? It's done very covertly. And that's the term is microaggression for that, right? Uh, or the term that's used when they ended up accusing you of being
Mm-hmm.
racist, right, or being hostile or angry when you hold them accountable. That's reverse victimhood, right? Now, the more common term is fragility, but I prefer reverse victimhood because it's literally like reversing who is the victim and who is the bully or who is the perpetrator, right?
Yeah.
These terms, as well as logical fallacies, as well as all these psychological manipulation techniques, right? Like I put in my one of my pinned posts, right? Like the well-known one is gaslighting, right? Reverse victimhood is also a form of gaslighting, where you're literally changing the reality of somebody, and it's based on this 1942 or 43 movie Gaslight. It's in black and white. I
Okay.
highly recommend people watch it. Uh, when this guy was literally so he wanted to his wife's inheritance. He wanted when her aunt died, and
Spoilers.
so he, yeah, so he would literally would turn like dim the gaslight, dim it, and then turn it off and on, or dim it, right, and then put it back up. And then when his wife said, "Hey, like, why are you turning off the gaslight?" He was like, "What gaslight? No, what dimming? I didn't. I know it's not. Like it's still like there's still light. Like you know, literally denying her reality, right, and literally lying, right, and so making it sound and look like she was the one that's crazy,
Yes.
right? And he would isolate her when he does that, so that there's nobody else to confirm for her, right? So like, and in that situation, like, even if the person is not crazy, they might be driven crazy, right? So yeah, that's gaslighting. Literally denying and even changing reality, rewriting reality, right? To manipulate, to drive somebody crazy. Uh, then there is consent trolling. And in a way, consent trolling is another form of gaslighting too, where it's like, instead of addressing the issue, they would be like, oh, are you okay? You sound very angry. Are you like mentally well? Like, do you need help? Right? Like,
I'm shaking my head because of the fact that I've eyewitnessed firsthand, have
mm,
seen and experienced this in
mm,
a program I was in years ago, happening
mm,
to somebody. And yeah, what you just said, it was the exact way you were describing it. So that's why I was shaking my
mm.
head like that. Like, hmm
So then there's lampshading. Lampshading is acknowledging something without accountability, right? This is often used in comedy writing whenever they want to be racist or sexist or homophobic or queerphobic or Hinduphobic, right? This happened often in the Big Bang Theory. There is a great video by Pop Culture Detective, and almost all of his videos are pretty good,
mm,
even though he's a white man, is like he does a really good analysis of the patriarchy, right? Uh, and he's the one that put me on to this idea of lampshading, right? Where it's basically like what would happen in the Big Bang Theory is somebody would make a racist remark, and either the victim or somebody else will say that's racist, right?
yes.
But then they would just move on. There'd be no accountability, no making amends. Like we'll just move on to a different part of the conversation, or maybe even another scene. That's lampshading.
And for those who are not too sure what's going on, The Big Bang Theory, again, it was a TV show,
It was a TV show
comedic TV
that
show. I don't know
had
if it's happening now, but yeah, it was on for a while.
a lot of Hindu phobia in it, and they had a token Indian guy who was literally part of the Hindu phobic tropes as well, and literally actively taking part in it, right? So he was another token or pawn, basically. And he was the only person of color among the main characters as well. Like, they didn't even have a black person. They had this brown Indian guy. Uh, so then there is sea lining, which is pretending to be sincere uh, and repeatedly asking questions and asking for evidence, even when evidence has been provided repeatedly, uh, or when like the questions have been answered already.
Yeah.
They would ask the same question in different ways, and they won't care that you're tired. If you're tired, you'll be like, "Oh, like why did you like even say something before? Why can't you do this now?" This is badgering people, basically, right? That's sea lining. Then there's Schrodinger's douchebag. Uh, the term comes from Schrodinger experiment, where the cat is either alive or dead, uh, trying to prove quantum physics, right?
Yeah.
Where something can be simultaneously dead or alive.
Oh, I thought you said something else, but okay,
Yeah,
got you. I thought I heard douchebag, but yes,
yeah.
it's
So
Schroeder.
that's so the
I
term
thought it was Schroeder's
Schrodinger.
pet.
It
Yeah.
was it comes from
Oh.
that experiment, Schrodinger's
hmm
cat, and then now they've invented a word based on that experiment called Schrodinger's douchebag
Oh.
to describe this manipulation tactic where a guy would make a remark that's harmful, right? That could be racist, queerphobic, sexist, colonial, Hindu-phobic. And then only after he sees their response, he would decide whether it was a joke or not after the fact.
Yeah.
So if everybody's okay with it, he's serious. But if people get angry, he'd be like, "Oh no, no, no! It was just a joke. Can you even take a joke?"
Got it. Wow.
That's
Mm. Okay. I do
that's
appreciate
short
it. I
and
was
sweet.
making sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was making I just had to clarify to make sure I did not miss, hear what I did. And I'm like, okay, now that's again, relearning or referencing from the past and renewing it into modern day. But I'm again appreciating the knowledge was being set and put down, but for the sake of the time and for folks viewing it too, I want you to go about in any main points that you want to pop out to make sure that folks is left with, as well as um, send folks to all of your social medias, and then just wrapping up with any last further details that you want to share for this.
Mhm. Yeah, I think uh, to not assume that you know what you know,
Okay.
to or that you already know something, uh, to pause and listen, uh, and to acknowledge your global not privilege, right? Even if you're black or brown or indigenous, uh,
Hmm.
it's like you still have privilege over the indigenous people of the global south, for example, right? Like like the fact that the Burmese people and non-Burmese have the highest poverty rates in the United States at twice the national average. The fact that the United States dropped 2 million bombs on Laos, making it the most bombed country in history, right? So even if some Laotians or Burmese people have immigrated over
Yeah.
here, like who has more privilege or who is not more oppressed is not so cut and dry, and to not play Operation Olympics,
Olympics.
but actually try to listen to each other. Uh, that's like really most important, and then to learn the real history of a situation, to really try to learn the actual truth and facts, to learn about these manipulation tactics, to learn the language of social justice, and to recognize that Hindu phobia is tied to all of the other worldwide issues of racism and colonialism. So a Hindu issue is a black issue, it's a brown issue, and it's an indigenous issue. It's not like it's all interconnected, right?
Yes.
And I do have, I'm also a consultant and coach, and I do provide Akashic Records readings. I do have the programs that I mentioned, Reclaiming Boundaries, uh, to teach people about how to protect yourself from manipulation. And then I have my other program, Akashic Focus Accelerator, to teach creatives about how to reclaim their focus and their time um, from all of these like time wasting things, and to reclaim your health and your energy. Because
Yeah.
I know of at least two activists who have died from a heart attack. Even my mom died from like heart failure last month, right?
Oh,
Uh, yeah,
yeah. My condolences. I remember we did, but yeah, still.
yeah, and and part of it is her grief from not seeing me for like 20 years, right? Uh, and I couldn't go back because of all of this colonial nonsense, right? And so, so yeah, I do have these two programs, and I also have a Patreon, and and I have a mailing list that you can sign up on my link in bio. I have a Facebook group, When the Stakes Are High. I do highly recommend either joining my Patreon for as little as $6 a month so that you can support this work,
Yeah.
uh, and or just do a one-time PayPal or Venmo for anybody watching the replay as well. you can DM me or email me about it. So yeah, those are also, if you want to pay me as a consultant, you can join those programs, Reclaiming Boundaries or Akashic Focus Accelerator.
Yes.
And you can also put me on your podcast, or you can have me, you can pay me to teach your class or teach your groups, right? Like a professor at Naropa University, for example, paid me last year to teach a class on the 5 types of anger model that I have, right?
Mm,
So yeah, and that's important to know because you know we keep being called angry, right? Black people as well, right? All of us racialized people are hostile every time. Every time we speak out on these things, right?
yes.
So that's why I created that model as well, which I highly recommend you check out. I have an article on Elephant Journal called 3 Types of Anger. So I highly recommend those resources. Yeah.
Okay. With that, y'all, thank you so much, Kundan, for this also first and innovative look into Duopoly and this topic, but also for being more interviews of alumni coming and joining us for Show Us More. So I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you. Thank you of your time. Thank you of what you're sharing. And just again, to everyone out there watching, I know it can be a lot. I know that you may either feel that, again, it doesn't apply, but as Kundu was saying earlier, this is basically not only a systemic thing, but it is interconnected in any way, many ways and fashion. So we're not saying drop everything and start only focusing on that, but the main part is always to be aware. So please continue the awareness, and in any way, shape, or form you make a step towards something, you are still making progress. So please continue to progress forward. But with that
Mm-hmm.
being said, y'all, this has been another installment of Show Us More, sponsored by More Interviews, aka Memoirs of Our Real Experiences. And once again, thank you, Kundan, for coming through. Thank you to all that had came and showed up. But as that is going on, please, y'all, don't forget to continue to write your memoirs and experience so that you can keep growing and keep showing more of your life.
Mm-hmm.
With that, you guys, peace, one
Peace.
love. Until next time.